with Tanya and Nettie. How are you, Tanya?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Into the new year. It's summer over here, so we're into holiday mode and beach and river and all that sort of activities and longer days. So yeah.
We're into it's 4:40 here and it's dark
Yeah.
and it's rainy and it's miserable. So I'm taking a bunch of my vitamin D
Okay. We
as
we
prescribed.
we definitely bring the balance back of summer and winter. I find that quite interesting to see over the 6 months that we've been doing this, to see the balance of you coming from summer and me from winter, and then the switch over. All right, let's get into the topic today. We're going to talk about living life through two perspectives. So through your physical perspective and through your intuitive or your soul perspective. And it's almost having two minds at the one time. So do you want to start? So
Um, sure. So as I shared in the last podcast, I'm going through a breakup and it's a good thing. It's a positive in the sense that I think some space is needed. And he's still my best friend. He's still my best friend. And yeah, so we're still staying in touch. But what I wanted to touch on in relation to that topic is this really interesting perspective that's been happening for me that we talked a little bit off camera, because honestly, we came to this not really sure what the topic was going to be. And then we started talking, and then we're like, okay, I get it. Yeah, okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about. Is so my father's ill, and I went home to the prairies for Christmas because this will definitely be his last Christmas, just to spend some time with my family. And in sort of going through this, my psychologist calls it complex grieving,
okay.
because it's a bunch of different things kind of at the same time that I'm grieving. And he not he sorry it's hard for me to explain. So I'm going through sort of this ending of this relationship, and then I go home, and we all know that most of our stuff comes from our family of origin, and I'm seeing my family interact, and I'm noticing things like, for example, my mom doesn't speak up for her needs. She doesn't speak up for anything that she needs. She just kind of gets angry about something. So there's all these kind of different life lessons, areas in my life that I have had to very consciously work on in order to grow and develop and be a healthy human being. And but what I wanted to share is that I'm having this experience where I'm grieving and I'm crying and I'm going through this normal, like, physical 3D body experience, but I'm also having this higher awareness at the same time of seeing sort of these connections.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I see how I could see things this way because of this family of origin. Or I see how this person in my previous situation is feeling this way because I'm seeing connections from this. This is really hard to explain. I'm seeing connections from this experience, almost like draw lines back to that experience. Does that make sense? Did I explain that properly?
No, absolutely. I see it in a way that, like if you go into a room or into a situation that you've been to, it, like you're at a party or something like that, and you all of a sudden you're talking to someone and your brain's sort of in that thing. And then it's almost like you have a narrator above you going, this is you talking in that same way, and see how that person across there is doing this. It's like you've got two conversations. You're still holding the same
Yes.
conversation, but your life's being narrated above you, or the situation is being narrated above you, and it connects things from your past and things like that. This is how my
Yes.
brain constantly works. And we talked about this is
Yes.
how, we have. And since I was little, I've always had like these almost like this narrator going off, which is actually just your higher self connecting, right? But it is, it's having the ability to connect through to that situation and connect through to the physical situation at the same time. And so you're almost living like two lives in the one moment. And one's physical and one's intuitive.
Intuitive. So what they're saying is, or they're bringing to my mind is having a bird's eye view and a
Yes.
worm's eye view at the exact same time. So I'm moving through sort of my experience, but I'm seeing it from a completely different perspective in my mind's eye at the same time. It doesn't take away it. So I don't know if we've touched very much on spiritual bypassing, but people that have the ability to have this higher level of consciousness have to remember that it's really important to still have that worm's experience,
Yeah.
because we can't just see things from a higher perspective and go, okay, well, I mean, this person's acting this way because of this, or this is happening within me because of this. Oh, okay, well, now I have that awareness, so now I'm fine. It doesn't work like that. We still have to do the worm's eye view, where we go through the grief, we go through the pain, and we go through that very human experience. And spiritual bypassing is not is going into the spiritual in order to make you not go through the human experience.
Yeah. And I think we've got a human body for a reason. So
Yes.
we need to go through it. I think awareness is what I get out of that. So having the awareness to go back and then change your patterns, or change the way that you do things, or identify in a way that someone else would see you and go, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. And I get it for other people too. You can sort of, you see the bird's eye for them as well as yourself. So you're
Yes.
kind of going, oh, in your case, mom, you're doing this repeat pattern all the time. And then the other siblings are doing that, or your sisters do that as well. And you can sort of start to see how these patterns sort of all work in the family, or in friendships or in relationships, whatever it is. So it's important to remember that it's a tool to identify, and then you go, okay, now how do I change that? And it doesn't mean it's, oh, now I know tick, it's going to be easy. Sometimes when you work that out, you go, oh shit, there's a lot I've got to go through before I can get myself off that path or on the other one. And sometimes breakups are great because they actually change our emotional balance in our body. So they change our physical and our intuitive perspectives, and we feel a bit out of whack within ourselves.
Yes.
But it's like the lighthouse. It's all of a sudden we've got light on a slightly different spot now, and we're like, oh wow, there is the island. We talked about that, I think, in the last podcast, and it's like it just changes your direction a bit. It doesn't matter how spiritually connected you are, that change is still going to happen. And if it's going to happen in physical and in intuitive at the same time, then that's awesome, because you can identify and you can change it, go through all the emotional, go through all that sort of stuff. And again, no easy path, but at least you're starting to see things in a different light.
I don't think any path is easy. I actually was going to post this meme that I found. I don't know, I was scrolling on some social media and I saw it, and it's a picture of Lisa Simpson in like a yoga pose. And it says, me manipulating myself so that I don't care and do not get sad. Right? So
yeah,
that's sort of, it made me giggle, because it was like, okay, that is the epitome of spiritual bypassing. Like,
yeah.
and one other thing that I was going to say is, oh my gosh, I'm having these blank moments again. Okay.
Oh no. All right, you're on the wrong path.
Right? But anyway, so spiritual bypassing is that I'm going to go into deep breathing, or I'm going to go into meditation, or I'm going to just be in the now so that I don't have to experience these difficult things that are happening for me in my life on an emotional level. And it's like a pizza, we have to have the sauce, we have to have the pepperoni, we have to have mushroom, the green peppers. So there has to be alignment in healing that hits on the intuitive, the emotional, the spiritual, the physical. Like, it has to go in all of those in order for it to align, for it to move through you, is basically what they're saying to me. You can't skip one of them. You can't skip the emotional and just go to the spiritual and have this deep knowledge of something or deep understanding of something, because then you're ignoring the emotional, and then the emotional ends up creating the physical or the mental health or whatever it is. But what I was going to say too, and now they're letting me say it, is that my experience that I've been going through with my father dying and, you know, my breakup is, and I'm going to cry again, I am this raw nerve. And it's like my armor was taken off. And it's like I can't even find it to put it back on.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm tough. I'm not gonna lie. Like I've been a cop for 23 years. Like you learn to be pretty tough. And I've certainly protected myself from emotions and intimacy. I speak from these places from a place of knowing. And but I've just gotten to this place of just such softness that I couldn't, I don't think that I could even do it any other way.
Yeah.
At this point, there's just no other option.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so right now there's just this like waterfall of like squishy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I kind of like it, to be honest. Like it feels good. I've been very protective of my heart for a very long time because I'm a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
And feel things very deeply.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes something so traumatic in your life to bring out that softness and that
Yeah.
beauty that you had to sort of force down because you had to survive in the world that you were.
Which is what I'm seeing, you know, from the connection, like with my family and then with Kevin. And Kevin's a very, very lovely, lovely man. He's very soft and gentle and sweet. And, you know, so he always kind of gave me that nice soft place to be able to go be vulnerable. And it's a real gift. It's a real gift. I mean, now I'm a crying mess and I do it all the time. I was at work today and my coworker's like, "Oh, how are your holidays?" And I was sort of telling him what was going on. And I'm like, and I cry all the time. So just letting you know, if I start crying, don't be worried about me. It's just apparently the new way of, you know, living my life. But I think that's such a gift.
Yeah.
That's such a gift that I'm not stuffing it down and I'm not afraid
putting
of
up your walls of like, I'm fine, everything's fine, you know.
Yeah, because I'm not fine. And I'm not gonna, you know, I've just gotten to this place in my life where I can't pretend to be somewhere that I'm not anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we come back to, you know, the topic of having that that moment where you're finding you went home and you're in your body, but you're also above your body as well, and you're getting that narrated sort of style of lifestyle as well. I think that for people, when you go through these changes or these traumas and you do feel like your body has shifted sort of in some ways, don't be put off the fact that you can't do that, because it is actually not something that the average person will get to experience throughout their life. But Spirit is explaining to me that that is part of the world of dreams. So you'll go home and you might not have that narrated sort of body above you, or that higher self talking to you at the same time, but you will go to sleep that night and you will process a lot of those things through your own mind. And so you will wake up the next day without realizing that you've actually almost downloaded a lot of information in that same way. We're able to do that at the same time, you know, being awake, but that also is the reason why we're mediums. So, you know, why we can speak to spirit and other people can't, I think. You know, I was
is because we have the ability to access both at the same
time. Yeah. And I was speaking to a girlfriend the other day, and she said, you know, she loves our podcasts, but she was saying, you know, you two forget how strong your intuition is. And so when you say things every now and then, it's like, oh, you just do this. And she's like, I can't do that. I want to be able to do that, but I can't do that. And so she said, don't forget to remind us of ways that we're doing a similar thing, because I think everyone processes through similar sort of intuitive. It's just their awareness that is not there.
Right.
Yeah. And so dreaming is a big one. And before we started this podcast, Spirit was, you know, really pushing me on the dreams, but I couldn't, you know, I started to go on facts about dreams and stuff. And he's like, yawn. And I'm like, what? you told me to talk about dreams, he's like, not in that way. You need to start, we've studied dreams for many, many years, and we actually don't know why we dream. Everyone's got different theories, but there's been thousands and thousands of studies trying to work out what the point of them is, why some people remember them, why some people don't. But the biggest thing that I see, because I'm a massive dreamer, and I get a lot of messages from people through dreams that are highly accurate. I get a lot of downloads of information. But I do know, and I'm pretty confident in my knowledge, that it actually helps us process what is happening in our life in different ways. So even if you don't remember it, know that your brain will actually have absorbed it, your physical brain, and then it can actually deliver that knowledge and that sort of information as you sort of go through life, or when something tragic does happen, you're surprised how well you handle it, but it's actually been consciously delivered to you over quite a few times, so that when you get to that situation, you've actually lived that kind of life in a manner.
Sorry, so what they're saying is that you've already sort of been provided the tools. That's what they're saying, is
correct.
Subconsciously in your sleep. They're saying that they're always doing that, but we can be like you, very aware of it when it comes through in your sleep.
Yeah, some people will remember it and some people won't. And I do get a lot that I don't remember. I was just briefly mentioning before we got on the podcast, I had a dream last week, and it went for 2 days. I went hiking, we got lost. My son was there. He was the same age as me. We were both 16. My brother was there at 18. Like, that didn't make sense, but I remember every single detail of this dream like I lived it. And we got lost. We met these people, stayed in caves, went to this watering hole. It was amazing. And my son, came out with a profound sort of thing about getting lost in life and moving off the wrong path. And he said, Mum, sometimes and a few hours ago we were saying how bad it was that we got lost, and it did stress people out, and we were sort of up, but think about how we all worked together, and it actually wasn't that bad. And we've turned up this watering hole, which is one of the most beautiful places I've been in my life. And we've had this amazing swim, and I would never have had that if I didn't move off and get lost on my path. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was sort of sitting recognizing it. So I woke up in the morning in real life, in my human existence, next to my husband. I was like, oh my gosh, like, that was 2 epic days. And he's like, yeah, Christmas and Boxing Day were pretty full on. And I'm like, no, it wasn't that. It was the 2-day hike after this, and I was like there, and Will was 16, and I was gonna go, and he's going, oh, can we just go get coffee? And I'm like, no, I need to unpack this. Like, this has been 2 emotional days, right? And
he's like, honey, I just woke up. Like, get me a coffee.
Yesterday was Boxing Day. Can we move on? And I think that's a thing with dreams. Like, for me, they are so real. And it's like, what am I taking? What is that teaching me? But I'm also saying that other people are having those full, vivid dreams, but you won't recall it. You won't remember it. But those little lessons and those things in life that you've learned about moving off the path and moving in. My son's going to uni this year very soon. And so he will be on his own path and on his own direction. And it actually gave me some, he's, out of all the people, the 12 of us that got lost, he came out with the most beautiful saying. And I think that gave me the thing that he's got it, he's fine. Like, he can see when things go wrong, that he's got the right perspective. So it was an assurance for me. But because I can remember it, I've got to then sort of process it and try and work out what it is. And then I've got to decide, like, why do I remember that so well? And why was I there? And why were we the same age? And, like, all those sort of things that go on with it. But then later, when we were talking about it, I remembered all this data that came through that I can't remember vividly. It just comes through in flashes of data and information that I had to get down about, the human balance between exactly what the topic we're talking about, different age groups, how you're open more to intuitive brain. Like, when you're born, you're 90% intuitive brain and 10% physical, and then you move through it and you get to a teenager, like sort of 12 to 26. They were saying you're more 90% human brain and physical brain and 10% intuitive. And that's when you're meant to be physical. And you'll notice they'll start going to the gym and they'll start to care about what they're doing, and they start to get more negative to their parents, because you no longer got that intuitive connection, that really balance, and you start getting caught in emotions. So they get more emotional and they get more physical. And that's all because the balance of your intuitive brain and your physical brain have actually switched over. And then in your 30s, they start to switch back up until your late 70s and 80s. And if we're lucky enough to live into 100, you end back almost like a baby again in your awareness and your intuitive. And you no longer need the physical touch as much in your 90s and 80s, 90s and to 100s as you did when you were in your 30s, 40s, 50s. And in particular in your teens, like they want touch. The best thing you can do for your kid is to hug them and love them, and in that way, because they relate physically rather than intuitively. So all within that dream world.
Lovely.
Yeah, we're getting this two sort of things coming in. We're getting a dream that I remember vividly, and then all this data. And so know that you're getting that. Everybody dreams, unless you've had a medical issue. Everybody dreams. And know that data is coming into your mind that you can access, and that will download to you. And all of a sudden you'll go, I don't know why all of a sudden I'm seeing this in a new light. It's like, you've been listening through the subconscious. Yeah.
What you just shared about about your dream takes me back to our previous podcast, where you were saying just because somebody veers off of the path, that's actually okay, because then they can come back into the path. And it's more beautiful than ever, because if they don't veer off the path, to separate, and of course I'm speaking about sort of that reading, you'll go on for the next 70 years banging your head up against the wall.
Yeah. And you will have never seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I heard when you were sharing that. But also you talked about sort of the intuition and being able to, have spirit talk to you. And recently what's been happening, because I've been so in my emotions, and I process a lot in my head, like through speech, like I talk in my head, or like I process through talking it out with people, like that's how I process my stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Talk. But interestingly, this time with spirit, and that's almost why, like, when we were trying to come up with the topic, they didn't just specifically tell me. It was more, they are speaking to me through impressions and like nudges, and just kind of a feeling of what we're supposed to do, or what I'm supposed to do, but it's not a direct speech. And I think it's because they probably can't get through, because I'm spending so much time in my head or in my emotions. So they're kind of having to come and communicate with me in a different way, which I think is super cool. But was that it? Because there was more that you said, that you sat in the shed and you were kind of getting more downloads. Was there more information?
Oh, it's huge. Like, I'm trying to still write it all down because it's massive, but it talked about, even it went from when a mother has a baby, the balance of intuition and the energetic connection, and even things as like, when you have a baby and you hear the baby's cry and everyone else, it's like, oh my God, the baby's crying, or the baby's like, you change your baby's nappy and you're like, how can you do that? And it actually, because when you connect to that person, you become more intuitive and less physical. And so therefore the smell and the scent isn't as strong to you as what it is to everyone else. And so you move as a mother, like you might be in a level between, they were showing me sort of at sort of 50% roughly. And then all of a sudden you have a baby and your intuitiveness with that child goes up to 90% intuitive, 10% physical. And so you have this little connection. And as they grow through and they start shutting down their intuitiveness down to a teenager, it's then all of a sudden you're like, how come I can't relate to my teenager anymore? And it's because they've only got 10% of their intuitive that they're listening to. So it doesn't matter if you're even trying to bang on 50% to them, they're not going to hear that. So you're not on the same page. And they showed me in particular teenagers, how they get very into their physical body, as I said before. And they showed me, a guy in his 50s who was opening up to the wrong amount of intuitive, but due to trauma, doesn't want to go up into that level, right? Doesn't want to as he's getting older, his intuitive brain is getting stronger, but he's got all this trauma that if he goes into that level, he'll hit. And so he shuts down that and he goes 90%, he goes back to teenager. And they actually start acting like a teenager. They start going to the gym again. They start, not that going to the gym is an issue, if you can balance that and balance your health and your physical, but when that becomes who you are, and unfortunately, one of the balances that happen is they start to get an ego. So they start to get physical. They start to get into their ego. They start to disconnect with people. They start to use the word boring, which is something a teenager does, right? So if you hear someone in their 50s go, oh, this is boring. These people are boring. My life's boring. It's like, hang on a minute. The balance of your, like your physical brain and your, intuitive brain are actually out, so that you're not accessing people's, you're not connecting with people intuitive. So you walk in a room and everyone walks in and we're having conversations, but we're also connecting intuitively without even knowing. So we're connecting from soul level, because we're all, especially when you tend to mix with people a similar age to you, right? And so you're all up there and it's gone really well. And then someone walks in that shut that down and they can't connect with anyone. And they start to feel, you know, often they get depressed, often they get critical. They get really critical of people because they're just looking at people's physical connection and they're not getting that balance of the two. They start saying everyone's boring, you know, it's all that kind of thing. And then they start to look at the way they look in the mirror. They just see themselves. They see their physical. They want to go, you know, work out. And it's recognizing that and trying to open up their intuitive. And I must say, there was a time when I did this where I just felt so disconnected. It was about 5 years ago, from my whole friends, from my whole area. I'd go there. I was just like, I don't, like, these people are boring. Like, this situation is boring. We're just repeating the same shit over and over again. And I sort of took it as their issue, not mine. Like, I'm moving on and they're not. Like, and then when this all came through, I remembered that time and I remembered how I got out of it. And part of how I got out of it was to sit by myself, was to go for long walks, was to sit in the water, was to take time on my own. And what I was doing was processing all the issues that I was sort of blocking out, and I was opening up my intuitive brain back to the level that my age group should be. And then all of a sudden I kind of went, oh no, we're connecting in again and we're all sort of mixing back into each other. So at the time I felt like everyone else was the problem, but actually it was me that was, yeah,
because you had disconnect your balance. And the way that they're showing it to me is they're saying that these are the levels of healing. So there's the it's coming in a bit foggy, so bear with me, but it's like you have to have the right balance between the spiritual and the physical at all times to be able to connect on a 3D level, but also to be able to connect on a spiritual level.
Yes.
And if you don't have the balance in the two, that's when you feel that disconnection to other people. And a disconnection within yourself and with spirit.
Yeah. And I think, I think that balance is the key.
I'm just asking them what the solution is, and they're saying that it's not about okay, thank you. They're saying it's not about doing Reiki or doing actual energy healing or something like that to bring it into balance. It's about working through in the 3D. I know you don't like that word, but I don't know what else to use.
in the
physical world, your traumas, your fears, your difficulties, your childhood, all of those things, because that's what actually starts to, the way they show it to me is almost like a bucket. You know, you've got this much space in the bucket for spiritual, and I'm showing like a full bucket, and the emotional and the trauma and all of those things start to fill it up with sand. And then that shows less room for the actual spiritual. So you got to clear out that sand. And as a medium, I don't know what your experience is, but I certainly know that I have had to go through a lot of things. And I don't get to take the shortcut. I don't get to not go through the lessons, you know, and sometimes I'm like, for God's sake, Spirit, just tell me what I'm supposed to do so I can be a good little soldier and I can move through this, because I don't, you know, I don't want to keep having to sort of go through difficult experiences, but then you just move up to the next one, you get it anyways. But, you know, we don't get to take shortcuts, because when we don't have that extra space in our bucket in order to connect to Spirit, they're not going to be connecting with us. So we just have to go through these things. And that's kind of what it feels like I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Is I'm just moving through in the physical humanness.
Yeah.
To expand the spiritual in my bucket. Does that make sense? Because that's sort of how they're showing it to me as I'm talking.
It does. And I have a question for you, because I'm not saying this is the thing. It's actually a question to know the answer. But when you were speaking before and I was talking about going into a room, when you were talking then I could see you walking into your workplace, like you mentioned before. And I noticed that you're emotional. You were talking about you get more emotional, and it was giving it sort of a pear-shaped, almost emotional balance in your energy. And the message that I was getting was more about, was it an emotion? Part of the reason you're getting so emotional is not only your own emotional, but when your emotional energy opens up, you actually take on other people's emotional energy without realizing it, right? So you walk into a room and everyone's happy and excited, and all of a sudden, you know, you might have been in a bad mood and you're happy and excited. And if you're normally someone who gets it through your head, then it's more of a conversation, or you sort of can read people really well. But when you go heavy into your emotions and you can't get out of that, you walk in and without realizing it, you're actually picking up on energy from other emotions. Now, that's what happens in a party situation or a funeral or something like that, you know. Even movies, you go to a movie cinema and everyone hypes up, or a comedy festival, you all hype up. And my question is, do you think that is why people get more emotional when they're going through a trauma like you are, that is based on emotion, like on the heart, the love sort of thing? And do you think people actually pick up more emotion that will upset them more, or do you think it's just an internal release of energy?
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking me if what you're asking is if the reason that I'm crying and being upset more is because my heart's wide open.
Yes, but yes, I think it is. I think that the answer it is in some ways, but is it emotion coming out of you from your own trauma, or is it that partly that and partly that you're now picking up energetically on other people's emotion without knowing it? Does that make sense?
I think there's two parts. One is I have had been quite guarded emotionally with strong boundaries, because I would always pick up other people's pain. And in my job, that was very difficult for me. But what they're showing me now, thanks guys, is that needs to be taken off, because it's hindering connection.
Yeah.
It's that sort of energetic boundary needs to be removed, because I'm strong and I can process it all in a healthy way. But it's that disconnect that I would, or energetic boundary that I would put up so that I wasn't picking up on other people's stuff, was too much, and it needs to thin.
Yeah.
I think that's why you're asking the question.
Yeah, and they're showing me when someone dates, something that they said people will relate to. So when you meet a new partner and you really connect and you get to the next level, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I was never a crier, but all of a sudden now with this person, I cry." And they're showing me that's a very similar thing. It's like you've had this kind of emotional sort of disconnect from everyone. You sort of keep yourself within that, and so you're not someone who cries during a movie or does that sort of thing.
Oh yes, I am.
Well, you are, yeah, but generally people, they're sort of saying to the public, they're saying, you know, like you as in people who relate to this, it's like, then all of a sudden you meet this guy, or a guy meets this girl or partner, whatever, And all of a sudden they start getting emotional at things that they normally wouldn't. And it's exactly that reason they actually let down that guard. That person sort of comes in and hits that shocker, if we want to say that, of emotion, and starts to soften the walls that they had up about it. And then you do find all of a sudden, oh, I'm crying about this. Why am I doing this? And it's not a bad thing.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it's energetically, you're now connecting to energy in another way.
And I think that's a beautiful thing about relationship, is because we don't grow in a silo. We don't grow alone. We grow in relationship.
Yeah.
And that's in any level of relationship, be it a coworker, be it a friend. Look at, I've grown just in our relationship, in my spirituality. And so that's the beautiful thing, is that these people come into our lives and they change the way that we operate. And that, to me, really is the epitome of a soulmate.
Yeah.
In the sense that they come and they create deep change. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, you know, this armor's kind of been taken off and like I can't even find it to put it back on. Like, it's just, yeah. But I don't want to say that I'm picking up on things necessarily from other people. I'll pay attention to it. I don't know that I am. I'm just feeling the feels very deeply, deeper than I think I've allowed myself to before.
Yeah, I'm
really
I
can't
curious.
Start picking up. I can't start picking up on stuff from other people.
Yeah, I would love for you to be aware of that, to see whether, like, I'm really curious to know whether it's coming from internal only, or if it's a mix of internal and external. It's
I'm sure it's both. I'm sure it's both, but I wasn't very aware of it, but I will be now for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very cool. But I'm going to actually do some write-ups on that. I've started on that download and I've done the chart. So anyone who's interested to look at that more, we'll post it on our Facebook site, and we may end up talking about more about that, is what I'm getting through that. Tanya might actually add information to that as it comes as well. But it was mind-blowing. Like, my husband and I just sat there, and it just, as it was writing down on the paper, we were both just amazed at all these little bits of our life that were coming through. And I guess I probably had about, 10 weeks of data come through in a very short time. So it's very hard to, in that night, I lived 2 days as well. So, you got to remember how much data you can actually receive in one night. And so I'm loving when I get quiet time alone and I can just sit there and tune back into it, and it just starts coming out again. So I will definitely share more about it. Yeah, because it fascinates me as well. I love downloaded stuff. I just think this is super cool, especially when it makes sense to me as well. Like, when I'm learning from myself, it's like I'm hearing it almost for the first time.
My ears are ringing so loud right now. My one ear, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm hot and sweaty too. I don't know if it's because it's 25 degrees or 30 degrees today, or whether it's just spirits in the room. But what went from something that I thought I didn't know what we were going to talk about today, what I thought when Spirit told me yawn about dreams, I think they've sort of steered us on the right track. And I don't know whether we started with living with two perspectives as our topic, and I think we've covered that in some way, but I think there's a lot more to come for that as well.
What they're also showing me right now is that it moves into 3 perspectives, which we also have. So we'll have that interaction on the human level, we'll have the interaction on a spiritual level, but we'll also have the ability to put ourselves into other people's shoes and see things from their perspective as well. Yeah. So it's almost like they're showing me like sacred geometry, like a pyramid, and the pyramid representing the different perspectives. And I recall one of Jeanette Byro's podcasts, I can't remember what it was, but she talked a lot about perspective becoming a very hot topic, basically. And it's interesting because we've basically been talking about perspective this whole time.
Yeah,
through this whole podcast, because it's about that expansion of and I don't want to say consciousness, but it is the expansion of consciousness with the ability to see things from multiple perspectives. So they're showing me, like a diamond, and the light will refract off of it and it will have all the different cuts on it. And it's showing that having that the multiple perspectives is what guides us to wisdom and decision making. It gives us a more rounded experience and understanding. And they're showing me that that's what is needed in, I guess we're sort of going into a bit of a reading here. They're showing me that's what's needed right now for consciousness and for people, because there's a big need for things to come together. So black and white to come together, masculine and feminine, for us to not just come together, but actually like latch in and stick and stay, for water and air to be able to come together, sun and moon. That's what they're showing me, is that give me the word, it's not dichotomies. Yeah, it's almost like dichotomies, to be able to come in together and connect. So that's why they're giving us that ability to have those bigger perspectives, and that's when you know that you've come in.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about the combination of the physical and the spiritual, to be able to have both sites at the same time, not switching from spiritual to physical, but having them happening simultaneously.
Yeah, and while you're speaking, I'm seeing this bell curve as well, and it's actually not something that we humans haven't done before. We were here, and they're showing me that we lost the intuitive balance. And part of the reason I got this download of the intuitive balance was to remind people that this is what it is. So when you hear, like, a lot of people get sort of put off by the word, we're going to get an opening of consciousness and all this sort of stuff. We actually had that, and we were more in tune and more conscious and aware and in balance in our intuitiveness. And through modern world, we've actually come out of it, and we've lost our intuitive abilities, and we're all out of key to where that is. There's 50-year-olds who are balanced to teenagers, and there was it's all over the place. And what they're trying to explain is that consciousness that we're getting is just a balance of our intuitive and our physical brain. And if we've got that balance right, we can have all these perspectives, because we're looking at it not only through our own eyes, but we're looking at it through the eye of our higher self, which doesn't have the physical restraints that we have to see things. And exactly as you said, we're seeing it from perspective of other people within our room. And that's what we started with, at the very start, saying we can see it from above. And I don't know if I mentioned it beforehand or on the podcast, but where you can also the perspective of your friend, or this person across the room, or like, I'm often feeling like I'm in the shoes of other people, and I'll say, oh, I don't think you should have said that, because that person was feeling this, and this. And yes, it's putting my perspective on it, but I'm actually seeing it from a connection to their soul.
Yes, from their perspective. Yeah.
And you're actually connecting up. And I always say there's 3 parts of your soul. There's one that's in your chest, one that's just above your head, and then there's another third one which is actually up above. And when you balance your intuition right, when you've got this human intuitive mind and physical mind, you're actually connecting up there. And that higher self intuitive connection is connected with that other person directly.
Yes,
so
because it's
so that
energy,
information,
or spirit, or soul.
Yeah. So don't get too worried when everyone talks about this. You're going to have this awakening, and this, people talk about blue light coming in and all these sort of different things. You don't have to get bogged down, in the whole trying to understand that or trying to do that. What the thing that is important to remember is you need to get balance back. And they're saying, as a collective within the world, people are moving back towards that focus, back towards that balance of intuitive and physical. And by doing that, we start to see other people's perspectives, and therefore the pain that we would give on people, or the lack of understanding of why people do things, is actually balanced out, and we're not so harsh, and we're not so mean, and we're not so greedy. So when they're saying that kindness and love and all these things are actually going to come with this new blue light or this opener consciousness. It's just awareness of other people from their perspective means that we don't fear them, that we don't, misunderstand them, that we start to be compassionate to them, that we start to be empathetic. And I think that's a really positive thing. And Tanya and I have been from the very beginning, forget the jargon, forget all that shit, just what does it mean black and white? And I think that as much as it's hard to understand that black and white, it is just that you'll be more balanced with understanding your intuitive and your physical mind at the same time, at the age that you should, because it's a time as a teenager that you shouldn't be. You don't need to be. You can actually get
you need to be in your physical body.
Yeah.
And they're just saying, just as a reminder, that we find the balance of it by working through our trauma and our patterns and moving into like healthy attachment with people. So again, it's not something that you lay on a magnetic mat and try to balance your chakras. That this is not what they're talking about. They're saying, and we've talked about it before, look into the past, don't dwell there, but work through what it's causing for you today. Work through that. And that's how we make more space in the bucket for the spiritual, because trauma is a big blocker. And not all trauma is meant to be worked through. Sometimes these things are just meant to be accepted. They're saying that it's okay. And that doesn't mean that if you have trauma that you're not going to get the gift of intuition. It's just saying you got to move through to get your, they're saying like to get your nervous system relaxed enough as well. Because when we're triggered or we're in that trauma place or we're in survival mode, our nervous system isn't calm enough to be able to connect.
Yeah, true. Very true.
So just keep it real, keep it human.
Yeah.
Let yourself be human.
Remember the balance of the physical brain and the intuitive brain. We have both for a reason. People say we're physical bodies and we're a soul within that, but we're also the other way around. There's the importance of having connection to your soul, or it wouldn't be there. You wouldn't have access to it, and it's important to have physical. So balance them and work out for your age group what your balance should be. And if you want to sit on the mat and do your meditation, absolutely great, but don't do it for 90% of the time.
Exactly.
Do it for the percentage that your body at
and
that
then go to
time
therapy
needs.
For the rest of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, like it's balance. But we can't just go to therapy and never acknowledge that we are energetic beings at the same time either.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one foot in both worlds right there.
Yeah, and I do feel that we've probably gone massively over time because neither of us were timing, but it was what it was meant to be today. So I'm looking forward to the next one, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you're going with the progression. Your own personal traumas and thank you again.
Did you call it drama?
Trauma.
I thought you were like with your own personal drama. I'm like, thanks, Nettie.
No, it's drama in Australia. Drama.
It's
trauma.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I'm observing my experience from a higher perspective, and I haven't had that happen before. So it was lovely chatting with you. And I know that you're talking about putting that on the Facebook page, but I think we should actually talk about that in the next podcast, sort of this download. And if I can hopefully calm my mind enough to connect to spirit and get more than just nudges, I will get a download as well. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope this was helpful. I hope we kept it real, even though we did go a little bit into the airy fairy. Thank you everybody for being here. Please like and subscribe, share with your friends, and love you, Nettie. Awesome to see you again.
Love you too. See you all. Thank you.